Hello, everyone. Welcome to No One Cares About Your Band, a podcast where we talk to musical people about non-musical things. Some introductions today. If y'all want to go around and say your names and the stuff that you do, go for it. As always, I have my co-host with me, Ben.
Hey, what's up? This feels weird.
Ben usually does the introduction. And then also with us today, we have William from Glass Beach.
Hi, hello, I'm William from Glass Beach. I play the drums.
What's
Hell
up?
yeah.
Very good drummer.
Thank you.
You've got many compliments from our homies in Dogleg and also just about everybody I meet in the scene.
Yeah, for sure.
See, that's really nice to hear because I wasn't a drummer really before being in Glass Beach. I was a guitarist and a singer.
That's funny because that's the exact opposite of what Parker did.
I know, yeah. Talking to Parker was like, it was funny. One of the first days we were touring with Dogleg, I had mentioned like how nerve-wracking it is being the drummer because if you screw up, like it's really noticeable. Whereas like with anyone else, I mean, you can barely hear the other instruments at live shows anyway. And then like Parker out of nowhere was just like, "Oh yeah, tell me about it. That's why I don't do it anymore." And I was like, "Whoa, okay."
Damn.
Yeah, strong feelings. I get it though. It is nerve-wracking being the drummer.
Oh yeah, for sure. I can only imagine. Hence why I don't perform things.
Aren't you in Movers and Shakers or something?
No.
Yeah.
It's a bit. A bit. I tell Mover Shaker what to do and they sometimes listen. That's the bit.
That's the bit.
Yeah, so usually we like to get started with a little bit of music talk about what's going on with you and your band recently, what you've been jamming to, any live shows that you have coming up is usually a big topic. But
I can give you a list of canceled shows. Would that be?
God.
I think we've all got one.
Oh, I have a list of canceled tours, baby.
We literally had like all of April. We had like 5 shows in April that we were ready for, and we as a band we were discussing. We're like, are we playing too many shows in April? Because like people just kept asking us to play, and we were like, we're gonna be so busy, like, and we have all this other stuff going on. I wonder if we can even do it. Maybe if we should start saying no. And we were like, nah, let's play all these shows. And then like every single one has gotten canceled. So yeah.
It really hurts seeing every show that you have scheduled get canceled, and they all got canceled within like 2 days too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There were a couple that were holding out for a little while longer than everything else, but eventually they were like, I mean, there's one at the end of April that still hasn't really let us know if it's happening or not, but we're pretty sure it isn't. So I mean, and even if it was, I don't know that I would want to do it just because I don't want to contribute to like having a group of people get together.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we were supposed to play a fest in Pittsburgh today, and we like voluntarily dropped out of it just because like I don't know, it feels weird doing it right now.
Yeah, no, yeah, I get that. Yeah, so music talk. So just stuff that's coming up, things I'm jamming to, like that kind of thing. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool.
You find notable.
Mm-hmm.
Things I find notable. So as far as like music talk is concerned, I mean, we're creeping up on a year since we released our record like independently, so that's cool. I guess.
Has it really been that long?
Yeah, we released it in May of 2019 independently, and then it got re-released by Run for Cover in January of this year.
Wow. I guess
yeah.
I was jamming that last summer. I didn't even think about it.
Yeah. No, it's been a while. If it's good, we're working on some like new material. But when I say that, I mean like given that the last record took like conservatively 4 years, but if you want to talk about the entire writing process, it took like 6 years to make. We'll see how long it takes for this one to go.
Yeah.
Y'all are starting up like a Twitch thing. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So it's so funny. We've been talking to Run for Cover about this, and as a band for about 3 months or something, where we were like, okay, we want to launch a Patreon. We want to get a Twitch channel going. We want to start doing like live concerts and like all these things. And we sent them this long email of all of these ideas that we had, where we're like, hey, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do that. Partly like the Patreon thing especially is because like all of us before everything happened and like most of us lost our jobs, we were all working like 40-hour work weeks, like in warehouses and stuff. And the band itself isn't making money right now. It's not making money. It is like we're like on the cusp of like kind of breaking even. Like the amount of money we put into the band is now being supplemented by the amount of money that the band can make, plus like the support we're getting for Run for Cover. So like we're not making money as a band yet. So all of us are working full-time jobs, or at least we were. So there was a discussion where we were like, oh, we kind of want to do this Patreon, but Patreon's like so weird, I think, for artists, because like it makes the musicians and artists and stuff feel so guilty, I think, because they're like, oh, I'm asking people for money and da 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 da, and like I feel that personally myself as well. Like that's why like I've had a personal Patreon since Patreon started, because my brother is so like in sync with everything going on the internet that he was like, hey, you should check out this new thing called Patreon, like you should make one. So I did, and I never ever made it public. So now with Glass Beach, I'm trying to like spearhead that while also fighting that urge to be like, oh well, why should we be asking people for money and that kind of thing. But I think the mentality going into it just has to be different. It has to be like, well, we're not like sitting here like demanding people give us money. We're just like, hey, we're here, you can give us money if you want to, or if you can, don't like put yourself in any financial strain or like that kind of thing. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like as long as we're not, my big thing is like we're not making it a paywall.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's going to be no exclusive content. The patrons are going to get to like decide on certain things and are going to get to like see certain things earlier. But literally like it's basically like it's just going to be a big sponsorship program kind of thing. Like all the patrons that have the means and can afford to like give us a little bit of money every month are essentially going to be executive producing all of the content that we make that everybody gets to consume. So it's I don't know. I understand the idea of paywalls. I understand the idea of artists and like musicians and podcasters and stuff having Patreons where they have like patron specific rewards and stuff, because it gets people to sign on. And like you need to make money. Unfortunately, we need to make money. But I don't know. I just like it doesn't vibe with me. And I'd rather continue working a 40-hour a week job, if not like 40 to 50 to 60-hour work week job, instead of making any of our content exclusive. Like, I don't know.
No, yeah, I totally understand that. It's like a hard thing to kind of, I think in this, especially in like the music community, trying like the idea of passing around the same $20.
Yeah. yeah.
Everyone passes around the same $20 to buy each other's records.
And yeah. Well, yeah. AW, do you know the artist AW?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, AW has a Patreon and has had one for forever. And they just like tweeted out like for people to come support our Patreon, and in my head I'm just like, okay, I swear, if AW like is a patron of ours and then we're a patron of AW's, and then like if Patreon just becomes that new thing where like every artist is like funding each other, we're basically just like giving each other all of our money back. Like that is what it feels like in certain instances.
It's just that gif where everybody's passing the water bottles back and forth across the table. It's a good time to get connected online as a band right now, it seems, just because, all the shows and stuff are getting canceled. So, like, I've been seeing more bands get into, like, Patreon and, like, stuff and, like, Twitch and stuff like that. It's interesting. It's nice to see the ecosystem is at least moving forward and getting online and helping out people.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, like that's why it was. So this way, I started this by saying like we were talking to Run for Cover about this like 3 months ago or whatever, and it was like funny because we kept like we're like, when can we launch this? When should we launch this? When should we start promoting it? And then like literally when we were like, hey, let's set a date. We're gonna do it this time. We're doing all this promotion. Like then everything happened, and now like everybody's online. So we're like, oh, so we're just like we're a part of this whole like the movement that is doing the exact same thing out of necessity almost now. So like. Yeah, I mean, it's both good and like difficult, I think, a time to be online, especially as like an independent musician, because like musicians like, I don't know, like Death Cab for Cutie or the Strokes or like whatever, if they do an online like stream, they can actually get people to show up and like and watch it. But if you're kind of independent and say something like Glass Beach or Dogleg or whatever is competing with Jeff Rosenstock and AJJ and stuff, we probably have like a lot of crossover for fans. And if we both have live streams going on at the same time, and like AJJ was like live streaming like 3-4 days, like nights in a row, like that kind of thing is like, well, people can only go to one live stream at a time. And if like everybody's like streaming at the same time, and that's why I like things like, I think Indie Heads is doing an online fest, and a lot of like, a lot of places are doing like on quote unquote like online festivals. I like those because it pulls in a lot of people specifically like to experience this thing. Like, I mean, like Jeff Rosenstock and Chris Farron and them just did basically like an online fest, I think last week or whatever, and that was great. So I think like people just logging on and live streaming just out of nowhere. I know like Rosie Tucker is doing that a lot. Is like it's great, but I feel like you are less likely to get a bunch of people hopping in to check it out, because right now like everybody is doing that.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It's cool. I love that everybody is doing it, but it is sudden and vast, the amount of people who are deciding to live stream. Like I have friends who aren't like artists or musicians or anything who are like, I'm going to start live streaming myself cooking, just because like people are bored and are at home and are like stir crazy and want to,
I help coordinate Fochella, and we've been, we're like doing the fest itself on Minecraft. So we've been like building a bunch of stages, and then we'll be able to have people come in like if they have like a Minecraft.
Wow. That's a really good idea. I like that a lot.
Yeah, some of the stages that we've been working on are like freaking insane. Like I can like move around in Minecraft, and that's pretty much all I know how to do. But the like stuff that people are building is like really freaking cool, and we're having kind of like the bands go on this stage, and we're just gonna like stream it and then play like a playlist that they've made or like a recording over like Minecraft itself. And I'm really excited for it. I hope a lot of people tune in. You don't need to have Minecraft to do it. We're gonna have a Twitch stream. Shameless self-promotion from me over here. You know.
No, that rules. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. That's such a good idea.
You should tune in. April 17th and 18th. We're getting down to the wire.
I think by the time this goes up, that might have passed.
Oh yeah.
By that point, I think we're that deep on episodes. So.
Yeah, we're in pretty deep at this point. I'm so sorry, Ben.
No, it's all good. I got plenty of time, so.
Should we launch into our main topic for the day?
Sure. I think I've said. I think I've talked about all the things that I would want to talk about. Oh, I haven't talked about what I'm jamming to.
Yeah,
I don't know. Melee by Dogleg. That's been like my repeat for a bit. And then recently, because of my bandmates, I've been listening to a lot of anime intros. So
both people and topics who are very familiar with the podcast.
Yes. It works. It works out that we're talking about people like suddenly streaming themselves and suddenly being online because we suddenly just recorded about 8 episodes of a podcast.
Oh my gosh.
Since all this started, so.
Absolutely chaotic episodes too, for the most part.
Oh yeah.
Just mass chaos.
That's good though, right?
Yeah,
it's fun.
William, if you don't like, if you haven't
Bring the
listened to
chaos.
episodes where you haven't, we never kick anyone from the Discord server, so anyone who's recorded before can come in and like join an episode. So we had like 10 people in here, some of whose episodes have not come out for an episode about wrestling. And just like, so many people chiming in every once in a while. And one of the guests on that episode, Mike, he's been kind of doing sound effects for us on some of the episodes that we have too. It's pretty fun. Yeah.
Like live sound effects?
Like he has like a something programmed where he just goes online and looks for like a sound effect and it'll just play it like real time. He'll be like recording with us.
Okay.
All right. So shall we hop into our topic for the day, which is podcasts. We're gonna get a little meta here. And
yeah.
I just wanted to say, William, that if you have any shit to talk about the concept of podcasts, or if I ask you questions, do not feel the need to be positive about it. Like, we're not, our feelings aren't going to get hurt by you talking about some of the negative things I'm going to ask you about podcasts. So, just wanted to start off with that one. So,
I think I have no negative feelings about podcasts. So,
okay, great. Love to hear it.
Love it.
Just to jump right in with the obvious question, what is your favorite podcast?
Good Christian Fun is my favorite podcast.
Oh, okay. I have no idea what that is. Can you give us a little?
Cool. I would love to. Okay, so Good Christian Fun, and I suppose like precursor, I was raised extreme evangelical, but you don't have to enjoy this podcast. Okay, the reason I want to talk about podcasts because it's probably the only like thing that I do with my like side time that I haven't tried to like turn into a career or like a job or something. Because like the other topics we were talking about, maybe doing were like tabletop role-playing games like D&D or stuff like that, but I literally do like tabletop live streaming, so it's like I've turned that into a performance thing. And like the other thing I do is filmmaking, but like I do that like literally also as kind of a career or I'm working towards. So this is, I think this is like the only, I don't really game, so I don't have like a sit down like hobby or like just calming, relaxing thing except for podcasts. And Good Christian Fun is my favorite podcast. It's a podcast about a couple of Christians who dissect and like analyze Christian pop culture. For the most part, it's media and stuff created by Christians for Christians, that kind of thing. So like they've done like analysis and like critiqued like God's Not Dead or DC Talk or like just like a whole all sorts of that kind of like I think Audio Adrenaline, they've done like something on Toby Mac recently, just anything like that, like Christian based media. They also did an episode on the life of Brian, so I guess like in certain instances if it's like Christian adjacent or whatever, but I love it because like the two hosts, Kevin T. Porter and Caroline, which it's funny, I can't remember her last name, Healy, I think. Yeah, they're my favorite two guests, my favorite two they're my favorite two hosts that I have like had like seen and like heard the chemistry between like on a podcast. It's amazing. And their humor is like exactly right for me. I don't know. They get like really, it's like they get really unapologetically blue, and they I should ask, can I swear on this? Like,
yes,
and stuff.
Fuck yeah.
And how graphic can I get? Like, can I talk about jizz?
Like.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, okay, it's just like that. Their podcast talks about they like do like a bunch of cum jokes and like stuff like that, and it's like really wonderful. And they have a different guest on each episode to talk about a different topic. And the biggest reason I like the show is because they take the first like full half of the episode to just let the guest give their as what they call guestimony, which is their relationship and experience with religion, whether it be positive or negative, and like whether they have like stayed with the faith or like are agnostic or atheist, or they've had like a couple people who are Buddhist on the show and that kind of thing. And it's really, really, I don't know, like they give so much time for the guests to talk, and they never rush them. And I mean, there have been a couple episodes that were like 2.5 hours where like an hour and a half of that is the guest talking about their experience, and then they do like an hour on the topic. And I get done with the episode and I'm like, God, I wish that was longer. That's like how I feel about that show.
That's
It's
awesome.
really cool.
Yeah, it's great. It's so funny. But yeah.
I grew up largely like similarly somewhat evangelical and like in like the Acquire the Fire, Toby Mac, like Reliant K circles.
Yes.
So I'm gonna have to check this out.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, like hop in at any point, or especially like if you have a background in like this kind of thing, like if you were raised Christian or whatever, you can. All the topics are in their titles. So if you just find them on like Spotify or whatever you listen to podcasts, you can just like go title by title and be like, oh, they're covering this or this. And if one of them jumps out at you, like you're like, oh, I actually know what that is, then like listen to that episode, because I think this show is so funny. And I think it's so good. I think it's so funny, it's so good, it's so thoughtful. The only thing that like sort of sets me off personally is like they do a lot of canceled jokes, and I hate canceled jokes so much.
Yeah.
I really don't like canceled jokes. I think it's like kind of dismissive of the process of like trying to out like abusive people and actually get rid of them. And like if we can't even functionally get that to work, I think that like jokes about it are just, I don't know, a lot less than helpful. But other than that, the show I'm really, really in love with.
That's awesome.
That's my favorite podcast. Yeah.
Cool.
So you may have mentioned this. Are the people who host it, are they Christian themselves?
Yeah, they for a long time they would introduce themselves as Christians, and I think in the past year they started saying like we're a couple of Christians, and then like we'll like smirk and then go for now, because they're very like open about the fact that like they are constantly at odds with their faith for one reason or another, and it's not always like so concrete as like I am a Christian, period. So yeah,
for sure. I was raised in a fairly Catholic household, so I definitely understand, the idea of questioning things, because the Catholics and how they are, and
yep.
the
Catholics and how they are.
I want to say, while we're on this topic, that Reliant K holds up, and they are an amazing band.
Reliant K, they have a couple episodes on some Reliant K albums, and one of their first episodes they do the hunt for the worst Christian song of all time.
Oh no.
And I believe one of Reliant K's songs is in there, Mood Rings. Are you familiar with that song?
Oh no. Let's get emotional girls to all wear mood rings. God.
Yeah.
That is such a bad song.
Yeah.
It does not age well.
Yeah, no, it didn't. But yeah, no, Reliant K, that's, their songs slap. I'm with it.
If you like Origami Angel, you will like the album Forget and Not Slow Down. That's my piece. That's where I'm sticking.
I think that would be an excellent poll quote for either Reliant K or Origami Angel.
You can just reverse it for Origami Angel.
Yeah.
Does there tend to be like a certain type of podcast you lean towards? Like, for example, like on tour, I was listening while someone else was actively listening to Unexplained by Richard McLean Smith, which is it's kind of just a very good narrative podcast about different like supernatural type things. Like, would you say you're drawn to like more just, I don't know, like something like that's serious, or like just a bunch of people talking, or just anything in between? Or do you have a preference? Like if you're going to sit down and listen to a podcast, you're like, this is the, general type of podcast that I want to listen to?
I am drawn to political podcasts.
Okay.
Yeah. So like for a while I wasn't listening to political podcasts or anything just because I was like it was sort of that mentality of like, oh, I get enough of this in my everyday when I'm wanting to relax or put something on while I'm at work. I would
Yeah.
want it to just like strictly be entertaining or something. So
Mm-hmm.
for a while, I would listen to a bunch of like something like Good Christian Fun or the Bechtel cast, which I still love. I mean, like both of those, but they're fun and dissecting like movies. And I mean, like the Bechtel cast is Jamie Loftus and Caitlin Durante. They analyze film through a feminist lens using the Bechdel-Wallace test as a jumping off point.
Mm-hmm.
And that podcast is really fun. I dug into that a lot for a long time, but then I started sort of shifting because I became, I think, more political myself, just personally.
Yeah.
And the more I was like that, the more I would want to like have those political discussions with my friends or like people around me, and they would either tell me to shut up, or they would like. I found a lot of people in my life were like doing pretty consistent like bad faith arguments where I would bring something up and they would just like argue with it without being like analytical and like critical in a way that I thought was constructive. And so I don't know, I had like people tell me that like talking to me about this is exhausting, and they're like it always feels like too combative, and that's like kind of just my nature in that vein. So I was like, okay, if I can't do a good job of like talking to people about this, and if it's not something that they're interested in, I need to get this fixed somewhere else. So I started listening to a couple of political podcasts that I got recommended to me by a friend of mine. The big one out the gate, which I might get shit for this, is Chapo Trap House.
I support that.
Yeah, which is like I understand the criticisms of that show, and I also understand that like the problematic nature of like a lot of the people who are the hosts of that show. Like there's some pretty decent like casual misogyny in just in the language, and I know in the past like some people have taken issue with and like have felt that some of the hosts are a little like at least casually also transphobic and stuff, which I mean like I would not fault anyone for not listening to the show because of those reasons, or because it's just a bunch of white dudes like riffing and joking about politics and that kind of thing. But I mean like they call themselves like dirtbag leftists, and I mean like I get that as a term. It probably fits very well for them, but there's just something very cathartic to me about listening to that show, because they just like unapologetically will like just say that they hope a really conservative politician dies or like something like that. Like just hearing someone just like so unabashedly be like, oh no, we're left and like we don't fucking care about these conservative like bad faith people who just want to make money and kill people. Like like the first episode I ever listened to the first episode I ever listened to of that podcast was that I think right after John McCain died. And
oh no.
Yeah. And it was just them doing an entire episode completely trashing him.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, they would probably be like, that's in bad faith. Like, oh, you need to wait. Like, really, like a man just died. Come on. But but knowing John McCain's history, and then just like hearing people be like, you know what? No, I don't care that he just died. In fact, I I want to celebrate it because like he hurt and killed so many people that like this is actually good for us. And like to have that feeling myself, especially for like people who are awful and have done such awful things to people and have like been a like direct danger to myself and like so many of my friends, and then like to have a group of people that host an incredibly popular podcast say like, you know what, not only is it okay to have those feelings, but like let's openly like talk about those things. I was like, okay, I'm into this. Yeah. It hooked me with that. And they're very angry and they're very direct, and I like that a lot.
That one in particular is just so, I mean, I think you used the term cathartic before, and like it is absolutely just cathartic to listen to a bunch of people who are as like rightfully pissed off as, at least half of America should be.
Yeah.
I think it's nice to like actually hear somebody with a large platform just be pissed off and not have to worry about like what the consequences necessarily are, because they've got the largest Patreon in the history of that website.
In existence.
And, like,
Yeah.
And like, they can say whatever they want, and really they're not saying anything that different than you would hear on Fox News. It's just on the other side, and like, because it's on the other side, it's supposed to be held to a higher standard. And I think it's just basically them just stooping to the low standards of the opposition, I guess.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I mean, like
they still have a moral compass.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like the difference being, that like Fox News. God, I hope you don't have like super conservative listeners that are gonna like hate this episode.
I sincerely doubt.
Cool. I mean, like you never know, though. I mean, yeah, but no, what you were kind of saying, the difference being that like Fox News is kind of morally bankrupt, and I think that Chapo Trap House does in fact have a moral compass. I think they cut it short sometimes. I think they play a little bit of that like, oh, the left is too PC game, which I don't like or agree with necessarily, but like they do that because they've like criticized it on the show. They're like, oh, if we get like so PC, like if the left gets like so PC, then everyone's gonna see us as these like tone policing like babies, and no one's gonna think it's cool to be a leftist, and no one like that kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I mean, like I don't have to go out of my way to like be a dirtbag I don't know. I feel like you can be super cool. I think you can be super cool and PC. Yeah, which like, oh, it's so wild that this happened actually on your podcast earlier. I used the term stir crazy, and I like never ever use the word crazy, like ever. I completely absolutely like eliminated it from my vernacular because it's ableist, and I don't like to like, I mean, it's like, it's one of those words where like for a while people are going to fight it. It's kind of like the R word or whatever, because like people were like, well, I'm not using it that way, or like and I'm like, yeah, I know, but eventually I think like 5-10 years down the line you look back and be like, oh gosh, why was I using that word? I don't know. I feel like that's like something that's going to happen. But yeah, no, I firmly believe in like changing my language as much as possible and as much as needed, even if it only helps like 2 people. Like I don't really care. Like I don't, in the sense that I don't really care because I really care. Like I don't find it that much of like a difficulty. Like before I found out, like discovered my own like identity and like my gender and transness and everything, there was a long time where I was like fighting people on not calling a group of people guys. I was just like, it's not gendered. It's just like, it's just what people say. I just like say guys. Like I'm like, hey guys. And then eventually I like came around on it and was like, oh, like it's not that difficult to just say like, hey y'all, or like something like that. Like, and it like that's gender neutral. It doesn't like make anyone uncomfortable or whatever. And if it's like something that easy that I can just train myself to do like pretty simply, I just do it. I mean, like so you might think I'm a pushover or something, but I'll just do it. I'll just if someone like out of nowhere is like, hey, by the way, this word that like you've used your entire life has like some problematic connotations, I'd be like, okay, goodbye word.
Yeah.
Like what's that like little piece of extra effort gonna do, like in terms of doing good for making people feel comfortable? Like there's no reason to like not make that attempt,
Yeah.
When it's not significant effort either. It's like I tend to use the term dude a lot to address everybody. And I'll always, like, I know that generally has a masculine connotation, so if like I'm talking to somebody, I will typically try and ask if I like use it just unconsciously, if like it's cool.
Yeah.
So like, I get that.
Yeah. No, well, dude for me, I don't mind dude. I like for me personally,
Yeah,
I kind
most
of
people
dude
don't
makes sense.
seem to, but if anybody
Yeah,
is ever uncomfortable with it, I won't use it
no, yeah,
towards them.
sure. For sure. I mean, like same. I barely ever use the word dude anyway, but the one that does grind my gears, it really gets to me is when people like similarly use the word man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like just as like it's become like a colloquialism at this point. Like it's just like how people it's a filler word. Like someone will just be like, I don't know, man. And like I've heard women say it to other women. Like it's not like it is as removed, I think, gender wise as the term guys for a group of people is. But I mean, that doesn't mean we shouldn't. People couldn't go out of their way not to do it. But oftentimes, like people, I'll be talking to someone and I'll be like, "Oh, I don't know, man," and like that every time it happens, like in my head, I just go like, like,
Yeah.
there's just a little bit of a tinge there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel that one.
I'm gonna rattle off all like the political podcasts I listen to. Is that cool with you?
Yeah,
Go
absolutely.
for it.
Okay, so Chapter Trap House. The reason I said that one first is because I think it's the most controversial one, and
It's the
and I
biggest
get
one
it,
too.
and I get it, and yeah, and it's the biggest one. But as far as like, I listen to Even More News with Katie Stoll and Cody Johnston. I listen to Behind the Bastards with Robert Evans. I listen to Worst Year Ever with Robert Evans, Katie Stoll, and Cody Johnston. Let's see, political. I used to listen to Feminist Killjoys when that was still going. I used to listen to Let Your Voice Be Heard, like which is a Harlem radio station that got turned into a podcast. And then the two last ones are Red Menace podcast and Revolutionary Left Radio. And the reason I want to end on Revolutionary Left Radio is because that is maybe the best political podcast I listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I've listened to a couple episodes.
I sincerely think that podcast is like, I think that podcast radicalized me, like for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was on my way and a friend of mine suggested that podcast to me, and it like, I don't know, it said everything I needed to hear. It put like so much into context right away. Like certain episodes get really heady with like the Marxist theory and everything, and it can be kind of difficult to like fully grasp exactly what's going on, which is why I think like Red Menace is good, because those are like sibling podcasts. That podcast does a little bit more like in depth of like analysis and like giving you insights into the theories and everything that go into like communist and Marxist and sort of that entire like theory like area. But Revolutionary Left Radio is like even though Good Christian Fun is my favorite podcast, if someone was like, you can only listen to one podcast for the rest of your life, it would be Revolutionary Left Radio.
Yeah,
Just because it like
Cool.
It's so informative, it's so like leftist, it's so like compassionate, and it really cares about its listeners, and it wants you to feel validated in like the feelings that you're having, and it wants you to be informed, and it wants you to understand these figures maybe that have been like left out of history just because they are like they're communists or Marxists or whatever, who have actually done like incredible work. Like there's like these awesome like 2.5 like 3 hour long episodes on like Malcolm X and like Fred Hampton and that kind of stuff, and like just the amount of information that like I thought I knew about these like some of these topics, and then like fully understanding, well, not fully, but like getting like a closer look and a more in-depth take on their like the actual nature of these people and their like socialist like Marxist ideas, and the way that they like the way the Black Panthers ran, for example, is like I was like shocked that I had no clue. I mean, because I knew it's not like I was someone who was like propagandized to the point where I thought the Black Panthers were actually bad. But for the longest time, I was like, I think they're good, but I don't know anything. And then, especially listening to the Fred Hampton episode, I was like, oh my God. Yeah, it was amazing. I don't know. That podcast is amazing. But yeah, that's what I listen to political podcasts. I kind of geared that way. And I do find it kind of relaxing, just because there is like a certain catharsis to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Would you say that there's any like one thing that like really ticks you off about a podcast that'll like turn you off from listening to it if they do like one certain thing, like one type of bit, or just have like general things that they say, or not really?
Even like a particular type of podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah. Particular types of podcasts. I'm not super into narrative, like scripted podcasts.
Yeah.
I'm not, I can't get into those really.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like, I have nitpicks with individual like styles of podcasts for sure. Like I listen to a lot of like tabletop role playing podcasts,
Mhm.
and I do a lot of tabletop live streaming and stuff. I get a little like, I what would you call it? It's like it's a pet peeve of mine, which to have people break the narrative of the role playing game by doing a meta joke about like the like in character saying that they're rolling a die or something, like
Yeah.
or that kind of thing. Just because I mean, like it's funny, but like every single tabletop role playing live stream and podcast does it. Like even the ones that I'm on, like everybody, like it is the joke, like to do. So that like that won't stop me from listening to something, but that's definitely like a thing where I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. I mean, but then for a general podcast, a thing, I mean, I'm pretty forgiving. For a while, I would get irritated if there was like a little bit too much silence. Like if it was clear that people weren't editing out their silence, I would be like, oh gosh. But now I'm like, if I find a podcast that has a little bit too much silence in it, I just listen to it at 1.5 speed.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
In fact, because I'm pretty forgiving of the process as a whole. Because I had a podcast and I had two other podcasts that were in like pre-production that we had recorded episodes of that we never released. But like, and my job right now is to edit a podcast, so I get it. I get the amount of work that goes into it. I get how much like the turnarounds and everything. So if you can't go through and edit every and like and silence out of your episode, that doesn't bother me anymore. I think I'm too empathetic to the process of podcasting. I don't know that there's a podcast that I think is like, as long as you're not like putting dangerous information out there or like being evil, like malicious, or as long as you're not doing like anything like sexist or homophobic or transphobic or xenophobic, like anything that's like not actually like genuinely bad or dangerous that would hurt people. I find podcasts about anything to be valid and worthwhile. There's a ton of podcasts, and like if you have one, people probably aren't going to listen to it, like for the most part. And unless like you get really lucky, or unless you like grind forever and also get really lucky, or whatever. There's an element of luck, I think, in like anything industry wise. But I think if you want to make a podcast. And if you can't start out with like really, really good audio quality, then just do something. I used to feel different about that, but now I'm to the point where I'm like, just do it. Like, because if you don't, you won't. I don't know. I have so many podcasts and like projects that I thought about starting, but I was like, oh no, like everybody has a podcast. I don't want to just be another person with a podcast. And it's like, why not? Who cares?
We're recording an episode next week on Wednesday, and the guests are us, the people from the Emo Trash podcast, people from the E Word, people from Invite the Neighbors, which is a podcast that's really cool in Michigan. They do like a similar thing to what we do. And then Punks and Pubs, which are from the UK. So we're going to have like 12 people on this podcast that's only podcasters. And I'm a little nervous because I think we're the newest to the game. So
might be. The other thing too is it's all podcasts about our relatively small community of DIY music. So like that just lends more credence to the statement, because like there is a podcast for everything, and there are likely about 6 podcasts for anything. But back to the editing point, because obviously I edit this podcast. So like whenever we first started out, I was very like, see, I'll edit that out because it's very obvious. But like back then I edited out like everything. Like I was like zooming in on waveforms and like finding the exact end of like ums, even in the beginning of like statements and stuff. I would edit out like all silence and stuff like that. Now it's to the point where like, yeah, I've gotten a little more like lenient as we've gone on with it, because I kind of want it to sound natural,
Mhm.
and B, it just like makes it a lot easier on me to not have to pore over individual waveforms. But like by the end of the first episode, I could look at the waveform and know when either like I or our guest said like I knew exactly what the waveform looked like.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, the editing process, I mean, because like I used to edit a podcast called D20 Academy. It was an actual play D&D live podcast that I was on it, and Jonas, the bass player for Glass Beach, was the GM, and Jay was in it as well. This was before we released our record. This was like 2 years ago. But we did this D&D podcast. I edited 22 episodes of it, and I did full like sound design and like scoring for every episode as well. And I think by the end of it, I was getting like so involved in like making it sound like exactly how I wanted it to sound, and I had all these ideas for how I wanted to edit it and have the sound design and the soundscape and like all of these things, that a single hour-long episode would take me like 15 to 16 hours to edit.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah. I take maybe 3 to 4.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time.
I mean, exactly. Yeah. It was like, and I mean, essentially, I feel like, because we recorded like 36 episodes, but I only got to like 21 or 22 or something, because I just like burned myself out like really hard. Because I was doing that, like, we're releasing weekly or bi-weekly. We're releasing bi-weekly, and I was doing that on top of like trying to like write and record for Glass Beach, and also doing my 40 to 50 to like sometimes 60-hour work weeks. And like, I don't know, I got very, very overwhelming. And if there was any reason not to edit the podcast, I would find it.
Yeah.
And when I got to that point, I was like, oh, I'm clearly not enjoying this the same way as I was. So yeah,
makes sense.
Ben, if I were you, I would never want to hear my voice.
Dude, I don't want to hear my own voice.
I love the sound of my own voice.
You have a great podcasting voice.
Oh, thank you. No, but I've been recording my own voice since I was like 14 years old. Because like I remember the first time I heard my voice, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so annoying. It was like, it's so high and so nasally and like really annoying and like awful. And for the longest time, I mean, for like 2-3 years, I was like, this is horrible. And then when I was about like 17 or 18, I just suddenly like had this affinity like for my own voice. I was like, oh, like I love hearing myself talk now. Isn't that wonderful? I love hearing myself talk and sing and like that kind of thing. I mean, like I'm going to listen to this podcast episode, and it's going to be like it's going to be great. It's going to be a good moment, a good day for me. Just because, I don't know. I just like the sound of my own voice now. And not only that, but like, you know how you sound different in your own head than you do in a recording or whatever?
Yeah.
Like to other people. So I've heard my own voice so much now that like I basically like, I don't know if it's like my brain has rethought out the way that it picks up the frequencies in my own head when I'm talking, but I sound exactly the same to myself speaking as I do in recordings now.
Wow. I don't think I'll ever do that.
I don't know. It's I haven't met anybody else who actually likes the sound of their own voice, but
it's a unique characteristic, which is funny because I hang out with people who sing all the time.
As do I.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm also I'm an actor as well, and I love watching myself act, which is like another thing that like other actors are like. I mean, I think what we're learning is this is just a big ego thing for me.
Nah. I can imagine watching yourself act, though, is, like, significantly different than, like, hearing your own voice. Just, like, I feel like there's so much more, well, there obviously is so much more expression in terms of body language and stuff that I feel like I would never pick up on the like weird things that I do if in the same way as I would with my voice and like film, like recorded acting. Yeah, so I can just imagine that's a really unique skill to have. Is being able to like,
that's lucky.
yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. I think it's extremely lucky because like I know like all of my actor friends hate watching their own performances. Like I would if I'm in something and like it actually gets released, I'm like, yes. Yes, I can't wait to see my performance in this. Like whereas everyone else is like, I want the footage for my reel and I want like my stuff to be out there so that people can see me, but like, oh gosh, if anything ever gets released that I'm in, I don't want to see it. Like and I'm like oh no. Yeah, I do find that very lucky. I think it's lucky that I like the sound of my own voice, and I think it's lucky that I like to watch myself act. I can't guarantee it's not an ego thing, but maybe it's not. I don't know.
Who's to say?
You decide. Leave a comment. Where do people write a review?
Leave a comment on the podcast. YouTube video.
Oh, you put stuff on YouTube?
Yeah, we're on Chillwavve.
Oh, cool. I just listened to you on Spotify. The lovely Spotify that pays everyone so much money.
Everyone who makes money from Spotify is just, they're making fucking hundreds and hundreds of dollars instead of like the thousands and thousands of cents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered everything that I had. Ben, you got anything else?
I'm just trying to think.
Now you know how it feels to be me.
True, honestly. Usually I'm on the other end of the hosting spectrum, asking the questions. Nah, I think I'm good. Good job, Ellie. I'll let you. We gotta let you do this more often.
I gotta do some more research and actually think about things instead of the silly quips that I come up with.
I think I like being the quip person.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
I could see that. I think the quip person has a difficult job, but not in the same sense,
When we were talking about earlier, like things like using the word crazy or referring to a group of people as guys and how easy it is to something, I have to interject an old quip, and that quip was, yeah, it's similar to a certain lighting element. It's so easy to just not do, and it could help thousands of people. Who knew?
Ellie runs a anti-strobe light.
Oh yes.
Leave DIY.
Yes, the same thing with like I like the Into the Spider-Verse. I remember that was a big problem with that movie.
Seen it? I started lead on account of not being able to see The Incredibles 2. I was like semi-involved in the music scene at that point, and I was like, well, I probably can't take down corporate Disney, but I can try and take down like small music things in terms of using strobe lights.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Like, that's awesome. I like that.
There's literally no reason to be using them, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, I'm not even photosensitive, and I hate strobe lights.
No one likes strobe lights. Hot take.
They don't add anything.
I'm not a fan.
Agreed.
The last thing I want to do is just rattle off a few, like the rest of the podcast that I listen to, just really fast. Just in case people want to know for whatever reason. But here I go. Okay, so the Besties, which is Griffin and Justin McElroy, and like I can't remember the other two guests, but they talk about video games and stuff. It's really good.
Oh,
it's only on Spotify.
The Rooster Teeth podcast, right?
The Besties? Is it?
Is that Rooster Teeth?
No, it's Spotify. It's a Spotify original.
Oh, I think the two. I think some of them might be with Rooster Teeth, but either way.
Oh.
I like the people, but I've never listened to the podcast.
Gotcha. So that's the Besties, Best Cast, Behind the Bastards, Rivals of Waterdeep, which is a really good D&D podcast that has all people of color cast. My Brother and Me, of course. I do, in fact, love the McElroys. Greetings Adventurers is another D&D podcast, which is incredible. If you are looking for something that's more like just people playing around a table and like feeling that camaraderie of like a group getting together instead of like it being this like highly performative, like very narrative like thing. Greetings Adventures is hilarious and it feels like very down to earth, like you're just listening to your friends playing D&D. It's really great.
Mm-hmm.
The Adventure Zone, of course, which is the other end of that, a highly produced D&D podcast. Asians Represent, which is a show about like the tabletop, and they talk about like the Asian representation in the tabletop scene, and they also have their own D&D podcast that's a part of that. A really short form podcast called My Year in Mensa, which is by Jamie Loftus. It's like just 4 or 5 episodes or something, but that it's really great. It's about Jamie Loftus, who joined Mensa, and like she does like basically a breakdown of like the inside of the of her experience with it and everything. It's really interesting, very well done. Voices at Play, which is another tabletop podcast where they take games made by marginalized voices and performed by marginalized voices. So cool. That's very cool. And then of course the Revolutionary Left Radio and Red Menace and the other things that I mentioned. But yeah, I'm glad you let me talk about podcasts because I really love podcasts. Oh, and then my friend has a podcast called What You Think Podcast that just got released. It's got a couple episodes and I like that a lot. And my friend Andre is very, very talented and also a really great rapper as well. Dre Dupre or Dupree. I can't remember how he pronounces it, but DRE space DUPRE. I directed a music video of his and his new podcast is really fun. That's all.
That's awesome.
Okay. Thanks for letting me talk about podcasts. Yeah, I can't believe you let me do this. Because I was like, when I was pitching the ideas, the one I wanted to do was like talk about podcasts, but I was like, there's no way. There's no way they're going to let me do this.
No, I've been wanting to do a podcast episode for a while. I have some other people who are podcast enthusiasts, but they would probably not want to come on the podcast. But yeah, no, this has been super fun. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So shall we do some outros real quick?
Hell yeah.
Want to plug what you got going on, William?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at kwilliamwhite. Follow my band, Glass Beach, at Glass Beach Band. We also have a Patreon. I mean, by the time this comes out, we have a Patreon. And
true.
We have a Patreon. You can follow us on Twitch. It's all patreon.com/Glass Beach Band. I think the Twitch channel is just called Glass Beach right now, but I think we're going to change to Glass Beach Band. I don't know. Either Glass Beach or Glass Beach Band, but follow us on Twitch as well. We're going to be doing like live stream concerts and like some gaming stuff and a bunch of other things. And then I don't know. I'm excited for the things that we're like setting up here in the future. We also, one big thing I want to plug, I mentioned the Greetings Adventures podcast. We actually have like a side project with one of the members of that podcast, Mike Bachman. We kickstarted a record of like nerdcore songs that we're working on right now.
Nice.
And that project is called Roll for Streetwise. So look out for that in the future. You can follow the Twitter account for that is I think oh no, wait, no, it's not exactly what it you would think it is. I need to look that up. Hold on. I just remembered I've tried to do this before and yeah, that's right. Okay, so Roll for Streetwise. You can find us on Twitter at Roll Streetwise. At Roll Streetwise for updates on like that kind of thing and everything. It's very, very cool, very fun side project thing we've gotten to do. I don't think I'm missing anything. I think that's good.
Cool.
Oh, awesome. Well, I do. I have a tabletop live stream that I run using the Kids on Bikes system, which is if D&D is like Lord of the Rings, then Kids on Bikes is like Stranger Things. So it's basically it's like that kind of thing. It's called Hijinks and Handlebars. It's on the Q Times Twitch channel, and it's also on their YouTube channel. All of the VODs of our backlog of episodes is on there. If you're interested in tabletop stuff at all and are kind of getting sick of like everybody playing D&D, this isn't that. So Hijinks and Handlebars, IGN, we're a long-running campaign, continuous campaign. We're just about to hit episode 50. So if that's daunting, it's okay. You just start listening whenever. And if that's not daunting and you're going like, yes, so much content, then check it out. All the episodes are in a playlist called Hijinks and Handlebars. on the Q Times main YouTube channel, or you can type in bit.ly/handle stream, capital H, capital S. That's all. That's all I got to plug. Thanks for having me.
Never a better time to get into something with a whole hell of a lot of content.
That's true. Yeah.
All right, Ben, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So you can follow my personal on Twitter. It's at Alpaca Neb, alpaca like the animal, NEB. If you want to follow my band, it's at Sweet Peach MD. Other than that, I'll let Ellie plug the podcast.
Yeah. If you want to follow my personal, on Twitter and Instagram, it's at Ellie_Hart, HART_THO. You could also follow a number of other things I do, which is at We're Around Music and at Lead LEAD DIY, the aforementioned Epilepsy Awareness Organization. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at No1CaresCast. And you can also stream us on Spotify, Apple Music, and on YouTube on the Chillwavve channel. Yeah, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you again, William, for coming on.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good day.